then. All right, so looking at this week, let's just go to the beginning. Here is our second week of color. This week in color, we will be focusing on tints and shades of hues, which is the art word for color, and focusing on artworks that are a little more abstract, and really their whole thing is to be about color. So that'll be a nice, refreshing, and sort of exciting thing to focus on rather than subjects that are figurative, which means like a picture of something. So these are mostly just going to be about color, which is kind of fun. So let me go right back to today's slide. And I want to start by looking at this color wheel right here. So last week, we started with a color wheel, also a 12-step color wheel. And that color wheel really focused only on hues, which were the like the pure color. We had primary, secondary, and tertiary colors on that 12-step color wheel. This one is different. When I show this one to you, does it, like if I were to focus on just one of those sections, like the orange one or the red-orange, for example, if you were just to isolate that in your mind, one of those little sections of strips of like 4, what does that remind you of? Does that remind anybody of anything in particular? Okay, so let me set the scene for you. Remember the other day last week, I think it was Monday last week, when I was talking about how I'm a person who's always been like obsessed with color, and it's like my favorite. And when I was little, I used to go and organize my crayons by color and sort them all out and everything. Well, what if I were to tell you that when, hold on. Okay. What if I were to tell you that when I was little, and maybe this happened to you too, and your parents like drag you to the Home Depot store, only back in the day it was just a hardware store, so it was even more boring. And I was always like, can I just go to the paint section for a few minutes? What do you think that I might have been doing when I was at the paint section? Cool. Anybody? What's in the paint section that this should remind you of? Has anyone ever been to the paint section before in a hardware store?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Matching paint with the color wheel thing. Yep. Piper just texted in the chat. It's like those little paint chips that have literally this kind of thing right on them. Usually a variety of shades and tints or coordinating colors. And I used to like scarf them up by the bucket load. And I used to make crafts with them, or I would just like hang them in my room, or I would just like literally just hold them to look at and match, because I seriously was that nerdy about color. So this morning when I was putting them up, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is exactly what they look like. Like I got all excited looking at this. So let's start with this shape, which is almost a rectangle, but not quite, right next to the word red orange. We're going to start right there and then work our way in. Okay. So that shape right there is the hue. That's the pure color with no white or black added. Then if we go in one step, that's the tint. The tint is the hue plus white, plain and simple. Then we go in one more, and this one's a little tricky. Not really, but only for a second, because that is the hue plus white and black. That's called a tone. In one more, which is that vaguely triangular shape, and that is a shade, the hue plus black. Okay, so that's what each of those wedges represents: hue, tint, tone, shade. So this color wheel, pretty fancy, has all of the hues plus their tints and shades and a tone, which is gray, basically mixed in. So that is a really nice representation of all of those colors, plus their tints, shades, and tones. You can find a lot of different variations of this on the internet. And we're really going to talk about the power of tints and shades in artwork as we go through today and this week. So first, let's try an experiment. When I get this nice and large on the screen, I want you to do that thing that we've talked about so far a couple times, which is really focus on your screen and squint at your color wheel. If we're not focusing on the hue so much, that's the color, and the value, which of the rings, like the circular rings, stands out the most as coming like forward at you, jumping forward? Which ring jumps forward? Anyone want to give their opinion?
The innermost.
The innermost, like the smallest one?
Yeah.
So the shaded, the shades comes forward to you, Mary Carol?
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else want to weigh in on this? Which one comes forward to them if you're squinting? The hues? The tints? Mm-hmm. When you say the first one, Piper, do you mean the tints also? Okay. All right, Mary Carol, I'm not trying to give you a hard time and tease you or pick on you. The shades are definitely standing out to you, and maybe that's what you're picking up on. But in art, with value, with just sight in general, things that are lighter are going to come forward, where things that are darker are going to recede. Those things that are dark are definitely standing out. That's undeniable. But they're going to pull back. Okay, so even though they're prominent, catching your eye, they're pulling back. So look at it again and squint and see how it almost looks like a pit, like it's like going, and that's because the edge that's got the tints, it looks like it's up front, and the innermost small one looks like it's shrinking away. Okay, we want to make sure that we use this to our advantage in artworks where we are trying to create the illusion of space. So when you look now, squint again and just try to focus on the hues. That's the outermost section with the pure colors. Some hues are lighter in value, even without adding white or black to make them darker or lighter. Obviously, things like yellow or yellow-orange are much lighter in value than blue or blue-violet. So colors like that are going to come forward. So just think in your mind about Starry Night. And remember, we identified that some things are focal points like those stars in the sky because they're coming forward, for sure. Okay, so we want to think about how that is a thing that's going to really influence which parts of your artwork come forward, which parts go back. Okay, so Mary Carol, I didn't mean to be like, you're wrong. But I think that sometimes we can misinterpret things that are prominent and eye-catching. I wanted to make sure that you understood maybe the difference between what's coming forward versus what's just like catching your eye. So looking at that color wheel and all the interesting things that that might lead to, let's look at this little video here about artist Bridget Riley.
When you stand back from Riley's work,
The volume is
alive with flutters of color.
terrible, but I can't make it better. I don't know why.
When you stand back from Riley's work, sort of alive with flutters of color. Bridget Riley is one of this country's best known painters. She'd been working with black and white up until the late 1960s, and she began to experiment with color. She starts with a very limited palette in order to explore the nuances, the relationships between the different colors. She uses color in combinations of stripes. And a stripe affords you the time or the length on the canvas. You've got meters and meters where you're able to look at how the color changes. So when you stand in front of the picture, your eyes start to settle into the rhythm of the color, and the paintings start to vibrate. The color seems to come alive. The diagonal paintings, it's quite complex how each color is interacting with the adjacent ones. When you have this other direction of travel, there's another energy. The colors that should become more and more vibrant, they start to set each other off and start to almost play games with each other. Riley's applied color directly on the walls of the Hayward Gallery. Something a little extra seems to happen. The paintings seem to have an expansiveness that opens up and allows you to get more enveloped in those nuances between the colors, and the colors start to come alive.
So Bridget Riley, which it's okay if you didn't hear all of that. I mean, it's not super, but it's okay. Oops. Bridget, oh dear. Okay, it's just rebooting, it looks like. Bridget Riley is a British artist, and she really became popular as a young woman. Here she is over here. See that? In the 60s, when the op art movement, which stands for optical art, got really popular. And it was a movement that really was largely just about line and shape and color more than anything. And she was incredible at harnessing those things to make this just really entrancing movement, just crazy art. So a lot of it was painting, but a lot of it was also silkscreen. And what I want to show, well, a variety of kind of printmaking. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say. Some of it was silkscreen, but I want to show you. This is the website that I go to a lot, which is kind of like a Wikipedia of artworks. I want to show you. Look at some of her artwork. She was born in 1931, so she's no spring chicken. But look at, she's still making artwork. And I want you to pay special attention to like this one up here with the dots, because we're gonna look at something similar to that in a minute. But her artwork here it started out just sort of black and white, but she did start to really experiment with color. This one I find fantastic. It's from 1971. Each one of those very measured stripes has like just slight movement in it and does less crazy things to your vision. I love those too. The green, blue, and red dominance, outstanding. So this one here, this Blaze, this is one of her ones from the 60s, and to me is like quintessential op art. Like when you think of op art from that time period, this is what everybody thinks of, like literally a salt on your eyes. But her artwork is quite beautiful, and it has so much to do with how things are spaced, how things are, wow, how the colors and how colors and shapes interact, value, how you can manipulate that to create space. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Wow, neato. So I don't think that you look at her artwork necessarily and think, what is the meaning of life? Kind of like, when we talked about Banksy, there was so much meaning in that. I'm not sure that Bridget Riley has that going on in her artwork, but she really does have a lot of thought put into how she achieves the effects in her artwork. And, some people are like, what are you talking about? But really, there is a lot going on there, and it's very deliberate. Okay, so you might be like, what are you talking about? They're just stripes, right? So let's look at this little tab I have here. Color mixing, optical color mixing. What is optical color mixing? Optical color mixing is a phenomenon that happens when a viewer perceives color in an image as a result of two or more colors that are positioned next to each other or near each other. The perceived color is not actually on the surface. Instead, the color that the viewer perceives is what colors result from the mixing of the colors that are there. In other words, if yellow and blue are placed on a surface in close enough proximity to one another, the viewer may perceive that the color green is present, even though it's not on the surface at all. So you might recall that last week when I first was showing the color wheel and I mentioned that the color wheel as we use it in the art room refers to pigment mixing. So you mix red and yellow, you get orange, and you've been doing that since you were in grade school. But then also optical color mixing has to do with like, the mixing of the colors in your eyes and perception. And it's closely related to like the way that TV screens and LCDs work and things like that, because it has to do with the perception and mixing of color. Uh, optical, oops, here's how it works. A combination of yellow and blue dots can be found in the image below. When these dots are enlarged, we clearly see them as yellow or blue. But if we take this pattern, make it smaller, repeat it, then we see the arrangement as green. This, of course, is what we would get if we were to mix yellow and blue pigments together. However, they're not mixed in this image below. They're simply laid next to each other in close proximity. Optical mixing affects value. Controlling the amount of negative space between black lines allow the pen and ink artist to create gradual change of value. So here are equally sized stripes, except for the one on the far left. And how much space you put in between them affects the value that you perceive. So let's squint at these. And when you squint at these, it seems like on the left, it's a little bit darker because there is not as much space in between for your eye to like breathe and get some of that space that's needed to make it look lighter. Then when you take that same group of lines and squish it and repeat it, then you can get even different shades of value and an overall different shade. Like if I squish it down, look at that. That leads us to pointillism, which I know you guys learned about in middle school. Give a thumbs up on your screen if you remember that with Mrs. Williams. And you did insects, I believe, or small animals or something. I think mostly insects. Anybody remember that? You don't remember? You really don't? Okay, well, that's a start. So this is by Seurat. He's one of the most famous pointillism painters from that time period, which was right around the same time as Monet. But he wasn't the only one. This is his most famous painting. It's gigantic. Look, it took him 2 years to do it. It's 81 inches by 120 inches. That's, feet. It's huge. It's ginormous. But this, when you look up close, even though this is pretty pixelated, you can see there's just layers and layers and layers of dots. In the cool areas that are shady and whatever, he would use cool colors. And so on, warm colors than warm areas. And he would just really, really, really mix those little areas. They're quite impressive. I hope you get a chance to see one of those up close. You can use other mediums besides just oil paint, like pastels or colored pencils, anything that responds and works well with layering. I think that doing pointillism on your iPad with one of our beautiful apps like Fresco would be amazing. So definitely you could try it with that. Anything, also because we have layers there, it would be really easy to try it anyway. I don't think it would be necessarily easy to do, but I think it would lend itself. Okay, so does anybody have any questions on optical mixing? Because then when you look at some of her artwork again, you should kind of look at it in a new way, right? Because like when let's go back to this one. When we look at some of these amazing pieces like this one, and you think about that idea of optical mixing, and when some of those lines are really close to each other, or some of the lines are squished, and when a line gets thicker and thinner, that adds to the idea of foreshortening, which means that it's like coming and going. So she's using a variety of methods to give her totally flat painting a feeling of depth and the illusion of space. Where it gets thin and thick, it looks like it's coming and going. Where it gets lighter or darker, colors are coming forward and back. When one color is laid next to another, it creates the illusion of a new color because things are next to each other and they're optically mixing. She's using so many different kind of tricks and illusions on us. She's very clever. She likes, look at that. Oh, here's my favorite one. $14,000. You think I should get it? That'd be a good investment. If I ever decide to invest in an artwork, maybe I'll do it. Numbered, hand signed, numbered, dated, framed. Maybe someday. Yeah, probably not. Okay. Anyway, I think that one is pretty cool. I like that one a lot. I just decided I'm going to put it on my wish list, Amazon wish list. We'll see what happens. I don't think I've ever seen that one before. Now all of a sudden I'm obsessed with it today. What do you guys think about this one? Oh, look at that. For me, nature is not landscape, but the dynamism of visual forces, an event rather than an appearance. What do you guys think of that one? Doesn't it kind of look like they get thinner and thicker almost? Like the lines, the color shapes inside of the straight rectangles make it seem like they're like wavy or tapered when they're totally straight. I think that's the illusion that I like in that one. Okay. I could sit and talk about art all day. All right, what questions do you have about Bridget Riley or op art or forward and mixing or forward and receding movement right now or optical mixing? Any questions about any of those things right now? Okay, so what I would like to do first or right now is to introduce a little bit the classwork for this week so that I can go into depth a little bit more tomorrow on some things, but get it started today. Okay, so what we've got, first choice is a 12-step color wheel that is going to include tints and shades this time. So it's important that you use the resource that I give you this time because it's got a lot more sections on it. So last week, some people created their own color wheels, and I want you to be sure that you're not doing that this time. So use the downloadable one that I provide on Schoology. You can use colored pencil or crayon or paint or whatever, but you also could use Fresco and do it digitally. You're going to make the hue, the tints, and the shades, okay? And there's a little video, but that's the part I'll probably show you in class tomorrow about how you can work cleanly using selections. Okay, so here's what it would basically look like. That's what the resource looks like. You're going to open it up if you're doing it digitally. And I would proceed with the hues first. That's the plain color with no white or black added. And then you can create the tints and the shades. Now, I noticed today when I opened this morning, and I was kind of surprised actually, that I put my hues in that center ring and then the tints on the outside and the shades in the middle, which now that I look at it, is kind of weird. I don't know why I did that. You can do it that way, or you can put them on the outside and work your way in. It really doesn't matter, except that you should be consistent. So if you want to put your hues on the outside next to the names, you can. If you want to put them on the inside, like the middle, like I did, that's fine too. But just make sure that you do it consistently. So here's what it would start to look like as you were doing that. You want to have a layer for each color, for each hue, and its tints and shades. I don't think that you need to have a separate one for each and every section, because that's a lot. Okay, so this is what it would look like. You want to make sure that the resources at the top set to multiply mode, so that it just hangs out on top showing the line art, and everything else underneath it can show. And that's what I plan to demonstrate tomorrow, one of the things that I'll go a little more in depth on. And then here you can see I'm showing a good example and what it looks like with the layers, and then pointing out some things that you wouldn't want to do over there to kind of help you out. And then the questions right there. Any questions on that? Color wheel? Okay. Secondly, for your choice for classwork, you could create an op art shape. Now, this is sort of like a warm up if you were going to choose an op art sort of theme path for your artwork this week. This is like a exercise leading up to that. So it's on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being your best artwork ever. 2s are like when we do thumbnail sketches. This would be like a 6 or a 7. So you're putting the effort in and you're making sure it's clear and decent craftsmanship, but it's not your best artwork ever. So like looking at my example, you can see what I mean. Like I did draw, but I wasn't making sure it was like perfect, and you'll see some more examples of that. So you want to follow through the steps. You're going to do this on your iPad. Oh, I saw a mistake there. Something about tints and shades. That's not true. Okay, so this is what it would look like. You're going to start with a shape and try different backgrounds, which are going to be lines that intersect it, and different combinations of that. You have to use separate layers for everything. So here's an example of what it kind of would look like in a workflow. I used a star. It needs to take up pretty much the whole workspace, or a prominent amount of the workspace. Then you're going to be drawing like kind of like background divisions. I tried one that was all like intense checkerboard, a less intense checkerboard, like a swirl pattern, and then like a starburst. Okay, so I wanted to see what a lot of things might look like. You're not going to have to shade all of them, like shade them in. I did just because I really needed to see what this was going to be like, but you don't have to. So choose a shape to draw, make it prominently on your canvas, try different lines. They need to go from edge to edge. You don't just like make them part way. Don't be too complex. Like you might start to draw some and be like, wow, this is super boring. But the complexity comes into how you divide the space and then how it starts to fill in, like this finished product over here. So try not to get too complex, okay? Because it might end up being just too much. This is like an exercise level, remember? So then once you've got your one you want on there, you're going to go through and sort of start to like mark out where the things are going to be blacked out with black or dark gray or whatever. And once you feel confident that it's a good choice and it's going to work, then you can fill them in. So you can see here that I didn't use a ruler, which I can show you when we get to the final op art piece. I didn't use a ruler. I didn't, you know, make it perfect. In fact, I had some issues in some of the ones that I tried, like places where it was white next to white or gray next to gray, no matter how hard I tried to make it. That's because this was a 6 or a 7 out of 10, not a 10. Okay. So if you were going to make one of these and it was like your best op art piece ever, you would go like this would be the practice piece. And then you would go in and you'd be like, okay, I want to make this star and I want to make it look like it's bulging. And you would do things to make sure that you didn't have any of those white next to white areas. You'd like line stuff up better. You'd make the star cross at a different place. You know, you'd fix it. So if you get a couple of those, don't sweat it. It's going to happen maybe. But if it was your final bestest piece ever, you would fix it so that that didn't happen. So here are a couple other examples that I played with. Okay, and then here's the reflection question slide. Here is our schedule for the week. That's us today. Today, your 111 artwork is due. That was the first color from last week. Had a rainbow theme or the Adam Hillman color photography or the Takashi Murakami artwork, pop art or super flat style artwork. So tomorrow when you come in, we're going to talk some more about color. I'm going to show you an abstract painter who does real colorful artwork. I'm going to do a couple more, well, do some demos regarding that classwork, and then that will be due. Wednesday, during the short class period, I intend to demonstrate or introduce the artworks and then do some demos the rest of the week. Questions on that stuff? Okay, so all that's left here is to take a quick look at Schoology. I have 2 of the classwork assignment or the classwork in the artist log posted here for this week. I moved last week's assignments to the past week's folder in case you're looking for them, except for the artwork, which I left up here or I put it up here. I like to put that in the current week folder. So if you're looking for any of the assignments from the past, they're all down here in the past week's folder. Okay, so you can find those things. Oh, there is one other thing that I wanted to show. Okay, just got to turn off of this. Hold on. Okay, so occasionally I'm saying things like, well, all the time, I'm saying things like, go check your email or check your Schoology, the comments on your artwork. So a lot of times I'm getting people asking me stuff like, can you send me a list of what I owe? Can you tell me something, you know? So first thing I would like you to do is to check the grades section of your Schoology, because when you look here, what you can see is that under the grades section, you can see what you haven't turned in, because it'll say 0, or you can see the comments that I left, which is supposed to be helpful to you and instructive. You can see the grades, you can see the projects. So when you are trying to figure out what you need to work on, please come here first. If you have confusion, and check out what you have turned in, what the comments are, and go from there. Okay, you can always ask me questions, but definitely check here to see if you can figure some stuff out before you ask me to mail you lists.